Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon we're international, we're continental. It's Lawrence Connolly from the Skylark, Liam Carrigan from Japan, and Ian Conroy from New Zealand. We are here to talk all things Celtic for the next hour or so. But before we get started, Liam, you're going to have to talk us through that jersey you've got on. Who is it? What is it? When was it from?
Well, it's Senegal. I think it's a training jersey from last year. And I don't know. I just had an urge to wear a Senegal shirt this week. Did they get a good result against somebody last week? I'm not sure.
Nice colour scheme. You're not going to get any jip for that.
No.
Quinny was getting dogs abuse yesterday for having the audacity or the short-sightedness to wear blue headphones. So there we go. Lawrence, every time I see you, you're in green. Your curtain is in green. Is that the green screen? Are you zooming in from the Skylark? But we're going to see the Statue of Liberty behind you.
But believe it or not,
right.
Yeah, we do have a green colour scheme in the Skylark too.
Well, it's no surprise. I remember one of the first events we ever did was in McCool's. You were there, Lawrence. It was with the one and only Brian McClare. And he told this story that no matter how long he's been away from Glasgow, he can tell a Celtic fan from a mile away because they wear green trainers. Ian Conroy. It's not bad. It's not a bad rule of thumb, is it?
It's not, yeah. You can always find your tribe, can't you? Well, you were saying that in the pod the other day, like back in the 80s, if you saw someone with a Celtic shirt, it was someone in your tribe. But now with modern media and sort of social media and stuff, people set to turn on even their own, which never would have happened back in the day. Your ally was always the man in the Celtic shirt. I grew up in England, so that was obviously much more prevalent as well. But aye, if you got green trainers on, you're definitely supporting Celtic, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. The Green Gazelles and all that kind of stuff. Ladies and gents, if I do disappear because I'm living in Fife, deepest, darkest, the wilds of Fife, the guys will just chat in my absence. Talk amongst yourselves about anything, football, life, politics, spirituality, football jerseys, anything you want. But today there is lots to talk about in the world of Celtic. I'm going to start off with some of these Japanese rumours. We have a resident Japanese expert in the house. Liam, what's been going on? We are scouting players in Japan.
Right. It's interesting that the one day I decided to take a wee day trip, I was literally on the bullet train when I got the story about that Inamura's link, and I had to start writing it up. Luckily, I had my wee laptop with me. But it's like, for God's sake, Celtic, of all the days you had to go for a Japanese player today. This guy is a good player. I had a look back at some of his highlights. Basically, he plays for Albirex Niigata, who are a very small team, right? I think I mentioned in the blog that they're analogous to like Ross County or St Johnstone, right? They're a kind of yo-yo team, kind of go between J1 and J2. Niigata is a wee bit out the way, quite a bit away from Tokyo, a couple hours north of where I am in Nagano. Lovely place, by the way. Visit it if you ever get the chance. But the thing is that this team had a really surprising and really good run to the Japanese League Cup final last season.
Mm-hmm.
And your man Inamura was one of the star players of that team. They were not expected to get beyond like the first or the second round, and they got to the final. And what they do over here is they tend to treat it almost like an under-23 tournament. Is they play their younger players in the League Cup.
Right. Yeah. Sounds good.
And the idea there is that basically if you do well in that, then the next season you'll graduate to the first team. So that's why if you look at Inamura's stats, he's only got about 33 games for Niigata so far.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because he was in the League Cup team last season. That team did far above what they were expected to do. So he's now in the first team. And he's done well enough now that he's been linked with clubs in Europe, although Celtic appear to be the first one to make a serious declaration of interest.
And that has been reported over in Japan, I believe, Liam.
Yes, it has. Yeah. That's why I chose to write about it, because I thought that there is actually something in this. There's enough evidence that there's something in it. And just to answer the question in the comments there, is he a centre-back or a left-back? He is both. He's primarily a left-sided centre-back. But as we've seen with Daisen, as we've seen with Kyogo, as we've seen with Reo Hatate, something that's drilled into players from a very young age in Japan is the ability to play multiple positions.
Yeah.
So Dyson's a striker and a winger, although I've always said he's better as a striker. Hatate can play central midfield and he can play left midfield or left back. This guy, Inamura, can do left-sided centre back or left back.
Now it's going to lead us to a discussion in and around if we were to sign him, Liam. How does that change the dynamic of the defence? Who's in, who's out, who's remaining, etc. But what I find quite interesting there, from what Liam says, Lawrence, is that novel idea of developing young players through a League Cup tournament, giving them competitive football, allowing them to kind of graduate into the first team. That sounds like forward thinking to me.
Yeah. With the work at Celtic, mate, would we put the trophy at risk? You know, we're expected to win trebles every season now, the way Brendan Scott is playing. So I suppose if they made that declaration at the beginning, listen, we're going to use the League Cup as, you know, the tournament to blood younger players in and give them a chance through, maybe fans would be more open to it then. But it's always good to win the treble.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Jim Orr speaks about this because it's one of the things you get to the point where you want to have it all. You would love to win the treble and blood young guys through, Lawrence, but there doesn't seem to be a way in Scottish football. There doesn't seem to be another way.
It's, you know, how many players would you blood in a team? It depends on the standard of the other players, doesn't it? If we sign another 3 guys the standard of Engels, you can maybe say, well, look, we've got enough players that we could carry 1 or 2 players. Certainly in the earlier rounds of the competition, you'd expect to carry them. So I suppose at the end of the transfer window, we'll know more, see what we've signed. Hopefully we'll be dancing on the ceiling at the end of the transfer window.
Oh, I seen what you did there, Lawrence. We'll come back to that. Absolutely love it. Yeah, we 80s throwback. I got it. Ian, you would have got it as well. That leads us obviously on to our friend of Acsom, Brooke Kuhn. We'll come back to that in a wee second. But Ian, in relation to it, it does open up that conversation again. And when we go through the squad, I think there is one area actually where there may well be an avenue. There might be an avenue for the young guys to come in and stake a claim. Steve McManus spoke about the 3 debutants. He didn't mention Daniel Cummins, of course, who would have been the 4th one last season. But the 3 that he did mention are all centre midfielders. And you think to yourself, you know, we're talking about what we need, what's missing from the midfield. Do we strengthen in the midfield? Well, if we do, the 3 guys that Stephen McManus mentioned last week, McArdle, Bonner and Turley, are 1 rung further down the ladder, aren't they?
Yeah. And look, our model is obviously sort of, you know, buying sort of cheaper and selling for a higher price, giving them the exposure in the Champions League, etc., etc. The ultimate would be to produce our own players and then sell them on. You know, you don't pay a fee for them. You develop them and you sell them on. So, in order to do that, you've got to expose them to the rigors of competitive football. And they're not. You're right, Lawrence. They're not going to get that at Celtic per se because we demand that we win all the trophies that we go for. Also playing for Celtic, that pressure. I mean, you only get the experience if you get into the team, but that pressure of winning every week. Sometimes, you know, it can bury people, you know, and you quite often see sort of players leaving bigger teams and going off and having really decent careers elsewhere. But I sometimes wonder about that kind of sliding doors moment. You know, would some of these players would they have made it at Celtic had circumstances been different? Had they had more of a chance in the first team? Like you kind of see, you know, during the dark old days of the 90s when it was a necessity to put players in. Perhaps sometimes like Jerry Creaney, would he have got a chance in a successful team? Probably not, you know. But he was blooded in, maybe, you know, because we were barren times, etc. So I do think it's a good idea to sort of blood the younger players in a League Cup scenario. We've won lots of trophies. I'd like to win it, but I would take the sacrifice for the long-term greater good of blooding younger players in. They'll see the pathway there as well. And if you shine, the fans will take to them. And the fans would demand that we saw more of them in sort of league games and things like that, and maybe in Europe as well. But they've got to be given a chance on the big platform. And if it's not possible, then it's loaning out somewhere competitive, as I've spoken before, and get just like Miller at Motherwell. You know, he's a young player, and would he be the player that he is now if he hadn't had all those games in the Premier League? You know, but with Motherwell, I think I said this in a pod maybe last year, the year before. If I, hypothetically speaking, if I was advising my children to go to a youth setup, I wouldn't want them to go to a big team. I'd want them to go to a Motherwell or a Hearts or a Hibs, because there's a quicker pathway to the first team, I would say, or maybe in the lower leagues, if you back yourself as a player. So, yeah, we should have the best young talent at Celtic. That tends to happen when you get these academies and you've got sort of them sort of hoovering up the best talent from round about. But quite often you see, especially in England, they will go and disappear, or they might not get a chance because the pressure, again, is the Premier League to finish in the top four. Quite often these teams become checkbook teams, and then it's the detriment of the youth players. So, but again, they go off quite often and go and make decent careers at other clubs, but not at the club that kind of had that investment with it for over a long period of time.
I used the example last week of Barry Hepburn, a young Celtic Academy graduate who went to Bayern Munich. He's been without a club for a year. He has not kicked a ball for a year. That's not good for any kid at that age. You look at McArdle, our development of our own midfield player, you compare that to Lennon Miller, maybe a wee bit unfair. Miller seems to be that talent, the generational talent within Scottish football. I get it. But as Ian says, it's the first team football that's allowed him to progress and develop into that player, Ian. That's the reason why he's sought after not only by clubs in Scotland, but also abroad. That's why he's broken into the international setup. So it's all about game time. And he was at Celtic. He was at Celtic as a young player. And obviously there was a decision made by the family at that time to take him to Motherwell. And it's worked out brilliantly for him. Whether or not we're interested in him, I've heard mixed reports. I'm not quite sure if we are. But I'm pretty sure we'll find out as the pre-season progresses. Some early comments coming in. I'm glad that the old Fife Wi-Fi hasn't thrown a grenade into proceedings, but I trust my three comrades to run with it if it does. Ridiculizer, you're straight in there. We're talking Nicolas Kuhn, and you are saying Down and Tool should spell Kuhn's end after the Champions League. He was uninterested. Fact. We meant to put fact in an uppercase, Ridiculizer, because that means that it is definitely a fact. That is unforgivable treason in a Celtic strip, and the same reason we shouldn't re-sign Edward. Don't care how good he is. I've obviously seen a lot of that. I deliberately used the image of Kuhn after celebrating against Dundee United, pretending he was a lobster, Liam. And this is the kind of chat we're getting a lot of. I'm not ridiculing Ridiculizer here. We're getting a lot of comments like this in relation to Kuhn. My argument is, if we want to strengthen, if we want to get bigger and better, then, bring in our first target on the wing, keep and retain Kuhn, and have a look at some of the other wingers we could offload. And the three I'm going to throw into the mix here are Tilio, Yang, and Palmer. And for the combined saving of the wages and the transfer fees you'd bring in, it probably pays for a new Swedish international winger.
I mean, certainly those three should be out the door before Kuhn. That's, just if you're looking at the overall quality of the squad, those three would go before Kuhn does. Even though I personally rate Yang a bit higher than I think most of us do. But the thing is, what Ridiculizer was saying there, I get it. A lot the attitude shown by Kuhn. Now, I don't know if it's intentional. Sometimes it's subconscious with these guys. And it's, he's given off the impression of a guy who's down tools. But that might not be the case. It might just be that he struggles to motivate himself for, the cliche of, I can do it on a wet Tuesday night at McDermott Park or whatever, And he's certainly not the first player to have that. But we shouldn't be selling our best players if we're going to build. We should be getting rid of the players who aren't as good first. So the other three go out the door before him. But at the end of the day, if a massive offer comes in, and like you say, it's going to pay for Nygren and possibly a couple of other players, then go for it.
Well, that is my kind of take on this, Liam, and I've been saying it since day one on a Celtic State of Mind. I referenced it yesterday. It is about growing and getting to that point that one of these summers, wouldn't it be great if we didn't sell one of our big assets? We tend to sell a couple a year, sometimes more. Last season, it was Kuhn and O'Reilly that left for big money, it's got to be said, and that money was reinvested in the squad, absolutely. David Stalker says Kuhn can go. as far as David is concerned, and Barry O'Sullivan gets in on the action to say, I think it's best for the club and Kuhn to part ways. Now, the £15 million is the figure that's floating about. 15 million, good reasons for the club to get this deal done. Lawrence Connolly, what's your view on this? Should we bring in Benjamin Nygren and retain Kuhn and then clear the decks, if you like? You've got Jota, obviously, coming back maybe January time. You've got James A. Forrest, I would say maybe a backup for another year. You've got Maeda, albeit we'll come to the forwards. I now agree with Liam. He's only been battered on about it for 3 years. He's a better centre forward. But obviously he can switch over to the wings and then clear the decks of the 3 guys that I've mentioned. Is that doable, Lawrence? Or is it all down to what the player wants?
It's a bit of everything, isn't it? You can only clear the decks if you've got buyers, and Palmer went out on loan and they don't want to keep him. Telio out on loan, I don't think they can afford him. I don't think Young's performances will have too many people chasing him. I think Kuhn was a bit of a victim of his own success in the first half of the season. He thought he was stick on for player of the year. Outstanding almost every game. His forms fell away, whether that was, can't motivate, sell, or maybe he was just tired. He played a lot of football. I wouldn't entertain 15 million for him. He won a lot more than that. He's proven he can do it at Champions League level. So you've got a guy that can score and assist at Champions League level, and you think you're going to get out for 15 million quid? You'd want more. He's got what, 4 years? He'll have 3 years plus the year's option left in his contract just now.
Yeah, yeah,
something like that. So yeah, I'd want to try and retain him. I think Palmer's days are done. Telio's, unfortunately for him, never really got started at Celtic, and Yang, he's full of endeavour and work rate. It's just the rest that's missing with Yang at times. So I think he's had loads of games. I mean, we talked about this when Rudy's boy was still here, saying, look, that first season of Yang, did he give us anything more than Rocker would have given us on the game? Money out our youths on the wing? Probably not. And it's maybe, hopefully, bringing in the likes of Engels and going for targets at that level, we'll see a reduction on the project players who tend to block our young players coming through. Because Taylor was bought, as a third choice. Yang should have been third choice. Injuries, he starts playing. Well, that could have been Rocco Vatter getting more game time. One of our own getting more game time. Did your third choice need to be a project player from elsewhere? Could we be saying, look, 2 really good players for every position, but the third choice is somebody we should be trying to bring through?
Yeah, absolutely, Lawrence. And I think you need to do that, especially with the developments at Barrowfield going on. What we heard from Paul Tisdale's presentation as well, they are looking to develop what they call Champions League standard graduates from the youth development. It's not been happening enough. But there are always going to be those questions asked about guys like Rocco Vatter, who was in and around the first team, Daniel Kelly, Ben Doak, and obviously Daniel Cummins. I'm going to go right back to that summer that you're talking about, Lawrence. We sell Jota for £25 million and we bring in 3 wingers. None of them for me, and I know Liam's got a bit of a soft spot for Yang, but none of them for me has stepped up. They've had plenty of time. Telio, obviously, there were other reasons that we spoke in depth with Jared about just a couple of weeks ago for him going back to Australia initially and originally. It doesn't look like it's going to work out for him. That's a shame. Hopefully, he can get a permanent deal. But yeah, you're absolutely right. As a youngster, let's say you're 18, 19-year-old and, Jota's leaving, you're thinking, okay, it's opening up. You maybe expect us to go out and buy 1 winger. We go out and buy 3. We buy 3 wingers. If you're a winger at that football club, you'll be tearing your hair out. And then as football fans, as Celtic fans, we're looking at it. We're reading between the lines. We're hearing things about youngsters trying to get away, agents turning their heads. But if you put yourself in the shoes of the youngster there, Lawrence, that's a very difficult situation to convince yourself to actually stay at the football club because the chances are going to be so slim for game time.
Yeah, it's getting further away for you. There's a football department that spent, what was Shang, was he 2 million or 1.5, whatever. They've got to justify spending that money.
Yeah.
So they've got to kind of justify spending that money and give him some game time. You can't go 2.1, but he's never going to see the first team. So hopefully last summer was a kind of change in the way we've done things. I know Tisdale's been appointed, but he was in as a consultant for a while before that. Certainly, Engels' record signing, and I think he's been great for us. So that's the kind of level of play we're going after now, rather than putting a lot of blockers in. You know, Brendan cleared a lot out of the squad. He's still got a few to go. You know, not least when you started off talk about in defence. I know Greg's away, Benzo's gone. You know, and a smart move getting Ross Doohan, and he counts for Europe. He's club trained, doesn't he? So out of centre halves, you know, it's not happening for Rocky here for whatever reason. I don't think he's in a bad game for us. I've heard it's in training the level he's able to get to. You know, there's rumours about Carter Vickers maybe a bid for down south. Trust it, not convinced yet. So
we're going to focus on the centre halves in a wee second. But 15 million quid for Kuhn. There's the question.
It would take a lot more, mate. You know, I think it's proven he can do it at the top level. So what we're saying is, the league was already won. He went off the boil a bit. The league was already won. You know, was that because he was tired? Because he struggled to motivate himself? He couldn't be bothered. He's got 4 years left in his contract. I think we should be, guy with his numbers, we should be looking for a lot more money.
Right. I'm going to ask you the question, Lawrence, right? Because it's not that I disagree with that. Do you think if Celtic get a bid of £15 million, basing it on the fact that he came in for around 3.5, 2 seasons later or a season and a half later, we sell him for 15, do you expect the club to take that and accept that offer?
So just over 10% of turnover, you know, it's something said we need to take note of. And I think they need to ask Brendan, but I think Brendan hopefully would knock it back and say, look, player's worth, you know, it's got to begin with a 2 before we sell him.
It's a big discussion point because I think there's just a few things you've said there, Lawrence, that I think could hold a player back from really reaching the peak in terms of the levels and the standards that you can attain. So, Ian, in relation to a player who gets moody, I've seen all the terminology in the comment section, down in tools, this kind of thing, not motivated, as Lawrence says, that player's not going to reach the peak. That player's not going to play in the top 6 leagues in Europe. That's not going to happen because all these wee things, you need to tap into that to become a top class player. So I would then question whether anybody would pay more than £15 million for Kuhn based on the fact that he's been so inconsistent for us.
It's a mentality thing, isn't it? And look, I was just thinking before when you guys were having that conversation about Kuhn, when he first came in, and obviously we didn't know the problems that he'd had, he was below Palmer, in my opinion. I think probably a lot of fans' opinion in terms of what we thought we'd got. We were like, oh no, here's another one. Then, obviously, we found out that he had the issue with the teeth, and he put a bit of bulk on, and he left Palmer, and he's you know left him in his wake, you know. And we were all like, oh, what a revelation, you know, what a player, you know. Now we know all the full story, and he was amazing. And then obviously after the Bayern Munich game, it kind of fell off a cliff in terms of, you know, the standard that he'd set. Now, I, for one, I tie my hat on the fact that Brendan Rodgers will not be happy with that kind of drop-off, and he will not stand for it, because it's contagious. That a bad attitude is contagious. You know, some moping around, and
especially in a big squad, Ian. In a big squad, it can be contagious.
Absolutely, you know. So I think he would, you know, 15 million. I mean, we're commenting from the outside. We don't know what goes on the inner circle. So maybe, you know, we're sort of drawing our own conclusions. His natural demeanour, I suppose, adds to that as well. He looks sulky. Maybe he's like the life and soul of the party. You know, he's got like one of those squeezy noses and squirts water out of a flower every day in training. Maybe he does that. You know, it's just a bit of a poker face for the games. But his form did drop off a cliff. So I don't like that. I don't think many Celtic fan would sort of like that. You know, you've got to get yourself up for the bread and butter games. That's where you're judged. You know, that we've got to win the league. That's how we get into the access to the Champions League. You know, this is things that we all know. So for me, I can't see us getting any more than 15 at the moment, unless Brendan has a sort of a good sort of stern word with him, and he picks up his form, or maybe even says, look, you know, pull your socks up and play well for the first 6 months and increase your value, then you can go. If he's actually agitating for a move, who knows? Again, it's all ifs and buts. But yeah, I was disappointed with the way his form dropped off. But I think it's more of an attitude issue, which he's had it. Obviously, he had it in his younger days at Ajax and Bayern Munich. You know, he's had the opportunity, these big teams. It's up to you whether you take it or not. And lots of players have the opportunity and don't take it. And I think he was one of them. So he's kind of obviously he's found his way to Celtic, and there's a redemption path there for him. But it's kind of he's now right back to almost where Palmer was sitting when he was sitting next to Palmer when he had his bad teeth.
How do you think it will affect him kind of bringing guys the level of Kieran Tierney? See, we send 3 guys, another 2 the level of Kieran. You know, people in the squad have then got to go, this team, they're building, they're going somewhere. It's something people want to be a part of, you'd think. And you'd probably be asking Kuhn to do less. You know, there was a lot on his shoulders, 2 or 3 guys to beat. You know, if you've got more dangerous and better players in the park, you should get more space. You would hope
that would change their kind of outlook, Lawrence. But I'm going to go back to January where people are saying that his form dropped, and I think it was clear for everybody to see. That's when we signed Jota. That was a statement of intent, bringing in a player of Jota's quality, yet Kuhn's form dipped. By the way, that I think there's also something to be said because we're focusing on the attitude, and that's fair enough. And the Dundee United celebration and all that kind of stuff, you know, we can read into it for reasons, not just because we're speculating. But I also think that there was an aspect to this whereby opposing clubs doubled up on him, sussed him out to a degree, targeted him, and then it comes to mentality. Because, you know, I could give you stories about great Celtic wingers who actually saw that as the challenge. All right, you're double up on me, and that's fine because I'm good enough to get past 2 of you. Kuhn seemed to like shrink, if you like. He was hooked. He was actually hooked 3 times at half time, but one of them was due to injury. The other 2 was definitely down to a really bad first half. And it's like when you're looking at the form, yes, a lot of it's down to form, mentality. But I think also he was kind of sussed out the second half of the season, Lawrence. But that's down to the player to then figure out and come up with something new.
Yeah. I suppose you'd say Johnston's form, they dropped the boy behind him. You know, there's a lot of factors in it. But I think it was sensational first half, and it's probably going to be hard for any player to keep that going for a full season. The level he got to in the first half. So for me, you know, I'd love to see him stay. 15 million, I'd be saying, no, it needs to begin with a 2 if he's going to move.
Would he need to have an entire season like that first half for that to be a realistic figure, Lawrence?
See if that first half had been spread throughout the season. You know, it the same standard of games throughout the season, but the first half had been spread over the full season. I think you'd be getting that money. I think it's because it was so kind of stark. You know, after Bayern, the league was won. Celtic were just picking up points at that stage, weren't they? The league was done.
You look,
I think
Calmat was raging, wasn't he?
So starkly change.
Yeah, Callum McGregor was raging because obviously he's the guy that sets the tone. He sets the standard, doesn't he? And there's a really interesting point coming in here, so I'm going to bring it in. It's from the urban culture in relation to a word that's been used a few times, motivation. The urban culture says lack of motivation across the board after the Bayern game. Players, management, and even some of our fans. Now, this is the thing, going back to what Ian says, it's contagious, isn't it? You know, and you need guys like Callum McGregor, and I think Brendan Rodgers is at the heart of this as well, to give them a shake, make sure it doesn't happen. You can do things like bring other guys in who know what the standards are at the football club. Kieran Tierney is one of them. And I always say it's so important for Celtic to have a core of these players. Here's where I am with the wingers, guys. I want you to disagree, agree, or otherwise. So we bring in Benjamin Nygren. I'm really looking forward to his arrival. He comes in. I would like to keep Kuhn. I would concentrate on making as much effort as possible to push out the guys that are not at the same standard. And I'm talking Tilio, Yang and Palmer. I get what you say, Lawrence. We've got a whole department. No, we've got a whole department of people who that's their job. Recruitment and departures. That is their job, and they need to figure out a way, be that out on loan to buy, move them on, clear the decks. James Forrest is your backup then. And I still see the name Michel Ange Balakwisha getting linked to Celtic time and time again. If we bring him in, obviously we've got Jota coming back in January. We've got to get rid of the extra bodies, Liam. We can't just have stragglers.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all about increasing quality throughout the squad. And you're right, you can't have any pedestrians in that. And the thing is with Kuhn, though, I think 15 million is enough for us to discuss with a club. But I would say I wouldn't accept less than 20 if that was the flat offer. But if it was like 15 million plus a 20 or 30% sell-on, maybe go for that. Because the thing is, if he goes to like England or Spain, right, or more likely England, I think, mediocre players there go for a hell of a lot more than 20 million anyway. So even if he goes there and is indifferent, he could still move on for 25, 30 million in a year or two to another club willing to pay stupid money.
So the sell-on is key, isn't it? And I mean, we've seen that this pre-season through the Jeremy Frimpong deal. The sell-on is absolutely key in this. That's my take on the wingers. Lawrence, do you agree or disagree with any of that?
No, you've got to move kind of. I think Palmer did an initial good 3 or 4 months. After that, as I said earlier, Tilo never got started. And Yang's all endeavour and work rate. He's not at the same football level as the wingers are going to do the Champions League for us. And I think that's where we aspire to. And if we can't develop somebody with the same talent as Yang in our youth department, we've kind of having a look at ourselves, haven't we?
Yeah, I think Yang was all. And the thing is, Yang cost a lot of money. Yang and Palmer cost a lot of money. If you combine the two of the guys, then Tilly a couple of million on top, it was a waste of money. And this is the thing as well for me when it comes down to the impact of a bad transfer window and how long it impacts for you for. So Brendan Rodgers comes in and we bring in 9 players in that initial window, Ian, and we're still talking 2 seasons down the line. 2 transfer windows per season. We're still talking about a lot of these guys and having to ship them out. You know, Lagerbielke and Nawrocki comes into that category as well. So it just shows you the damage of that poor recruitment window. It's the legacy of an old regime that we hope that we've seen the last of. When it comes to wingers and obviously trying to retain the best talent, if you were to say to Nicolas Kuhn, look, you've got another Champions League campaign, get us into the league stages, and, you know, come January, Jota's coming back and we've already got your replacement in the door and he's bedded in for 6 months, our new Swedish winger. Wouldn't that make sense, though? We don't do enough of that, do we? Succession planning.
No, that's a term we use quite often as well, isn't it? And it should be a conveyor belt. So hopefully with Paul Tidsdale, that's now going to be the kind of the rigor of you know, or Offerus Morandis in terms of how we operate. And it's I've got my doubts. I think a lot of us have our doubts, but hopefully that's what's going to happen. I mean, obviously in recruitment, you're not going to get 100% hit rate, are you? And it was a particularly poor window, that one. In terms of, you know, you were saying that list before, Yang, I think you're right there, Lawrence, as well. I think is a lot. I like his endeavour. You know, if you could transplant that attitude into Kuhn, we'd have a £40 million player. You know, but for me, I prefer attitude, good attitude, and you know, I think you can learn the other stuff. And look at Maeda. He's a prime example of, you know, there was times where he was a highly frustrating player in his first couple of seasons, done some great stuff, but so I think he's really over. He's either hit a level that he's not going to drop from, or this season, sort of moving to the next season, there may be a drop off. I've got a horrible feeling with Maeda that it's going to be a bit of a drop off and a return to his more natural, you know, being a slightly frustrating. I hope it doesn't happen. And then that leads into, I know we're not talking about Maeda, but it's just sort of sparked something in my mind that I've been thinking about. Is this the peak optimum moment where we should be looking at selling Maeda? Because if he does have that drop off next season, and it's kind of like a sacrilege to even say that, but it's a possibility. You know, has he actually squeezed his absolute maximum out of himself this season and sort of over delivered, and he'll naturally have a drop off. So it knocks 5 or so million, 10 million off his value. I'd also give Palmer another shot. He's coming back from Olympiacos. Maybe give him 6 months and see if he's sort of bucked his ideas up and given the opportunity to sort of maybe try and, because it may, you know, if he does, there is a player in there, but again, it's his attitude. If his attitude has changed and he's had a bit of a shock and he sees the opportunity he's got, even to move on to bigger and better things later on, if he sort of, you know, does a Maeda, for example, there's that option. You know, people probably shoot me down on that one. In terms of Yang, I would loan him out to another Scottish team for a season and see if that toughens him up, gives him that exposure, and sees if he's got a future at Celtic. I think he's getting a lot of crap from that performance against Aberdeen in the cup final. I think he was on an upward trajectory. I mean, I don't go to the game, so I don't see him close up like some of you guys do. But watching from afar, he looked like, obviously after that St Mirren game when he got the brace, and he seemed like he was kind of starting to do what Brendan had obviously seen in him in training and things. So I think maybe loaning him out for a Scottish team might not be a bad thing.
Well, when it comes to the rigours of Scottish football, the rough and tumble and all this kind of stuff, Ian, I actually was praising Yang for the fact he seemed to have bulked up. And then he had that injury and it kind of knocked him sideways, and he was really, really poor. And it's the recency bias. He was really poor in the Scottish Cup final. So absolutely get that. But I've never really been all in on Yang. I've always, even when he was showing good form, I was on the fence. I thought to myself, right, okay, you've played a few decent games, you've created some goals and scored a couple yourself. Let's do it consistently over a period of time. And when the chips are down, I want to see how you react as well. And I just don't think I've seen that from him. I'm going to bring in some of these comments coming through. Liam Devine comes in to say the regime sold Kyogo and didn't replace him. The regime waited until August to sign Engels and Trusty so they could guarantee profit from O'Reilly. It is not an old regime. It's the same incompetence. The regime I was talking about, Liam, was indeed the recruitment approach. So if you look at the first transfer window under Brendan Rodgers, that will not happen again. So I think that's down to Brendan. I think it's down to this new approach with Paul Tisdale being in the building as well, the cat in the hat. And I'm pretty sure, although we'll never find out until after the event, Rodgers has knocked back loads and loads of players that previously we would have been bringing into the building. And that type of approach, I think, has changed, because if you look at the quality we brought in the summer, people can agree to disagree with Engels, Ida and Trusty being quality. We'll get to all that. And then coming into, signing guys like Ida and Kuhn last January, and then coming into this January and bringing in Jota, I think that the regime, as in the people who make the financial decisions, is exactly the same. The recruitment regime, I think, has changed, but that's been, for me, spearheaded by Brendan Rodgers. I'm going to take one of Ian's points and throw it over to you, though, Liam, and that's on Maeda. I can understand what Liam means, because I think we are so cautious as a football club at the very top of the club, talking about that regime that Liam Devine mentioned there, that they would sell a player for 15 if they think, oh, what if his value depreciates by 2 or 3 million quid? They would take the 15 million for Kuhn. I'm hoping that's not the attitude when it comes to Maeda. I want to see Maeda as our first choice centre forward for an entire season. That's what I would like to see. You know a wee bit more about him than most, Liam. What's your take on the Maeda situation?
Well, I'm going to disagree with Ian in the sense that I don't think we'll see a drop-off in his form, because he has progressively got better from when I first saw him, which was back in 2018, so 7 years ago now. It was the first time I watched Maeda play. And you saw then he had the pace, he had the raw talent, but it was very, very raw. He refined that to the point where he eventually made the step up to Yokohama, and then he made the step up to Celtic. But even then, we could still see deficiencies in his game. And for me, over the course of the time he's been at Celtic, he has slowly filtered out those deficiencies. And you see it when he plays for Japan as well. He's much more effective now as an international player too than he was even a couple of years ago. He is a better player now because he has the right attitude. We've talked a lot about attitude from other players here. And again, I don't know Nicolas Kuhn personally, so I don't know if it's an attitude thing or not with him, and I don't necessarily think it's fair to judge if it is. But I think with Maeda, you can definitely see he has an excellent attitude, and he's willing to listen to whatever feedback he's getting from his coaches, taking it on board and applying it and developing. He's going to keep getting better, I think.
Yeah, Mo Sislak agrees with the loan option on Yang. Give Yang to Hibs for a season and see if he can take some points off our friends across the water.
That was a nice wee bit of diplomatic editing.
Yes. Kwon did that. Kwon made that move and it didn't work out at Hibs. Would that put them off, maybe? I'm not sure. Or would it improve the performance of Kwon? Because I'm expecting him to come back. He'll be coming back to Celtic this pre-season as well will quite a lot of loanees who've been out and about. Where's Paddy Lavery? Says Big Red. That's a good question. Where is Paddy? Can anybody let us...
ready for Friday, mate.
What's that, mate?
I think he's getting ready for Friday. We're going to haircut.
Oh, it could be hanging up the bunting, welcome Acsom and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Well, we did the Euros, Paddy, so he'll probably be painting a gable end wall rather than bunting.
Okay. Right, Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, you're on the YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, I announced yesterday we have now had 22 million views on the YouTube channel. Absolutely appreciate every single one of them. And to put it into perspective, as I was saying yesterday, no other Celtic channel other than Celtic have had as many as 22 million views. And the only two football clubs' official YouTube channels who have had more are indeed Celtic and our friends across the water, who Mo Sislak described earlier. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin. What was that, Lawrence?
Which version of them had 22 million? Was it the old one or the new club?
They're combining figures. That's what they do. They combine figures, they combine trophies, they just combine stuff, as you know. Debts,
so is it the Rangers YouTube channel, or is it the Rangers YouTube channel? Just so we're clear here.
V 2.0, I think it is, Liam. Afternoon all, Kuhn's form dropped off a cliff second half of the season. In his defence, though, the whole team's form in the second half of the season was lethargic, inconsistent, and unappealing compared with the first half. But you made the point, Lawrence. You made the point about the right back. If you're right back, I thought in the first half of the season, right, to expand on your point, Liam, Lawrence, I think that there was a triangle of Engels, Johnson and Kuhn that were linking up brilliantly. Didn't see that in the second half of the season.
No, didn't. So, big effect, but there's something you said as well. Guys like Carl McGregor, and KT, and Tony Ralston, Liam Scales, guys who it's about playing for Celtic and motivating themselves to play for Celtic. Whereas other guys, when they initially come, they might be they're motivating themselves by the opposition. So that's why they struggle, maybe in Scotland. Oh, I'm playing Bayern Munich today. It's not that I'm playing for Celtic. I'm playing the Champions League. That's why they're raising their game.
Yeah.
But you need that core that raise it because they're playing for Celtic. And it's like Ian said, it's contagious then. If you get enough of them and say, look, you're wearing the hoops today. Nothing but the best is good enough. So you need to give it everything. Doesn't matter who we're playing.
Lawrence, no matter what happens with football in the modern day, I think that's always going to be key to Celtic. That core group of players who understand exactly what it means to so many people. You're absolutely right. Spot on. Always go back to Pat Stanton talking about it as well, how important that was when he joined Celtic, that core group.
Paulo, talk about how Tommy Burns come up to his house with the DVDs and say, look, this is what it means.
Yeah.
Watch these. This is what it means to play for the club. Don't know if they still do that. I know Lennon used to go around. I don't know if Brendan goes round to the guy's houses and says, right.
Presentation, it goes with a mobile OHP and it just brings the screen down. Right, guys. PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint. You mentioned Lenny there. We chat yesterday or the day before, actually seen the clips. Haven't watched the full interview yet, where he speaks to Simon Ferry. And it's in relation to that moment on the sidelines where we sleek at Ali McCoist. And he finally opens up. I don't think he's really given as much detail as that before about what actually happened. And he blames Diouf. Now, it's like, I remember there was somebody on that TV show, Pointless, and she knew nothing about football. And her boyfriend said to her before she went to appear on the show, if you're struggling, it's a football question, just say Henrik Larsson. And she did, and it was Henrik Larsson. It's a wee bit like that. If somebody has created bother, just say Diouf, and it probably will be him. And that's exactly what happened. So Diouf was given Tim Williamson jip, I think, and
to probably run on the park and he shoulder charged the physio as he was being subbed off. So I think Rangers 9 yellow cards, 3 red cards, and Lenny get censored.
Oh, of course he did. Yeah, Lenny. Right.
It was like
that spat.
What did Celtic have 2 yellows or something?
Well, obviously there was the spat between him and Alan McCoist, right? There was only one manager. McCoist was assistant manager. There was only one official then who actually got a ban, and it was Neil Lennon. Lenny got a 3-match ban for that. Alan McCoist never got anything. He was allowed just to give it a wee nod and a wink and a wee cheeky grin. But there you go. Nothing surprising, really, Ian. It was just a moment. What I found interesting, though, is Neil Lennon said, at that time, I didn't give an inch. It was like the siege mentality for Neil Lennon back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've not seen the interview. I find it a hard watch, actually, that open goal, but I'll have to dive in because I love Lenny. He's exactly the type of player that we kind of want and wish we always had in the team in perpetuity. Sorry, like a Scott Brown. He was kind of I suppose the closest. Scott Brown was the closest to Lenny post Lenny. And I think we're lucky to get him in the dugout. It's he didn't give an inch. And he knew how much injustice as a club, Celtic faced. He faced it as a player under Martin O'Neill, that adversity, and Martin O'Neill obviously loves the bones of the guy, as we all do, or a lot of us do. Me, a big one of that. And Martin O'Neill knew his importance to Celtic. So, Martin O'Neill didn't give an inch either. It was far more eloquent in the way that he perhaps, it was like less of a chopping off the head, of more leaving a little X on people's cheeks, like a musketeer. Mm-hmm. Whereas Lenny was a bit more kind of like a chop your head off if you stand on my toes. Love Lenny.
Well, the big thing for me is it's every single time we do any kind of live event, and it's maybe Mialby or Alan Thompson or somebody who was in the vicinity, Lawrence, the second half of the night, you can separate the questions. There's always a bundle of people. What did McCoy say to Neil Lennon? And it's always the same, and nobody speaks about it. It's one of the ones that was like, it's like that question in Gavin and Stacey, what happened on the fishing holiday? Nobody talks about it, right? Everybody just clams up. But Neil Lennon's came out and basically told us what happened. So fair play to him. And in relation to that, by the way, it's a 1-to-1, Ian, if you do want to dive in. It's Simon Ferry and Neil Lennon. It's a 1-to-1 interview. So right, I think it works really well in that respect. I'm going to come back to you, Liam, because we started talking about, obviously, the fact that we are still keeping an eye on the Japanese market, something you and I spoke about time and time again. And you've got Inamura coming in. And I'm just want to talk about the dynamic of the central defensive areas. So you've told us that you can play left-sided centre-half, you can play left-back. Okay, so let's talk about centre-halves then. CCV, I said yesterday, it's always him plus another. There has been interest, apparently, paper talk at the moment in relation to CCV. But the way that I'm looking at it, this is the way I think it's set up. And a few people disagreed yesterday. So you've got Cameron Carter-Vickers, first choice, right-sided centre-half. And before we bring in Inamura, Liam Scales, first choice, left-sided centre-half, because that's how the season ended. That's how we started in the Scottish Cup final. Now, behind those two guys, I think that Brendan favours Dane Murray on the right over Mike Nawrocki, who apparently is going back to Poland on loan. So I think he will leave the football club, loan to buy, has to go out and prove himself again due to the lack of game time. Dane Murray, I think Brendan Rodgers fancies him as a backup. On the left-hand side at the moment, it's Trusty. So if you bring in Inamura and you're thinking, well, Kieran Tierney's your first choice left back, Inamura can be a backup to that. Where is he in the pecking order? Is he now a first choice left-sided centre-back, pushing Scales to second choice? And then what happens to Trusty? That's my big question, Liam.
Well, I think I'm going to sound like I'm sitting on the fence here, but to answer that, I think that Inamura potentially is both. If either Kieran Tierney or Liam Scales had to drop out for whatever reason, he could slot in either way. Sorry, to answer the question that Patrick's brought up in the comments, what height is Inamura? Last time I checked, it was 183 centimetres, which I think is about 6 feet. So he's not a small guy. So we don't need to worry about his height. I again, it's that versatility that you get with Japanese players. He could play either role. He's stronger as a central defender, but that's only because I've seen him play more games there. He might well be a decent left back as well. He's only played a couple of games there, so it's wee bit too early to say. Maybe. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's only played 33 games in total for his current club. So
yeah. I always go back to that. Rio having only played 75 games when we signed him. It's a similar
situation. He's 23, but he's only been playing professionally since he was 21. So
yeah. I mean, that's what I said yesterday, Lawrence. A few people came in and said, "Look, I would have Nawrocki over Dane Murray in the pecking order." I'm just basing this on what I think. Going by what Brendan Rodgers has said about Murray, he rates him highly. He would have played him against Rangers in the 3-2 game had he been fit. Nawrocki looks as though he's out the building. A couple of clubs interested, loan to buy probably. And then you're looking at Lagerbielke and Welsh being in that same category, if you like, as Palmer, Yang and Tilio. No longer required. That's the kind of simple way I would look at it. Do you agree or disagree? And again, where does that leave Austin Trusty, a £6 million defender?
You kind of look at Scales. I don't know if he's going to become the Greg Taylor. You could argue that Trusty, Lagerbielke and Rocky were all meant to come in and displace him. You know, and they've had a chance, and the jersey's back with Liam Scales. And some of it's down to that attitude, determination. You know, he's a Celtic fan. He knows what it means.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be surprised if we were looking for a first choice centre half. I know we've spent a lot on Trusty, but for me, he's not done enough to take the jersey off Scales. We're getting into Champions League. Will Brendan be looking, saying, I really need somebody in there that can take us up that level? I thought Trusty had some decent games in the Champions League. You know, Brendan's on record saying, I think it was at Ibrox, he said he played Liam Scales because he could bring the ball out from the defence, he can make the passes, something that him saying that, I think it will trusted to do it to the same level as Scales.
Mm-hmm.
Does KT coming in give a wee bit more option for players that can bring the ball out of defence and play and pass? Maybe, but yeah, I think Welsh, Lagerbielke, Rocky can all go definitely. Trusty maybe, you know, if we can get a first choice centre half in.
Is that first choice centre half Inamura? That's the question. Is Inamura replacing Trusty, and then it's a fight between him and Scales for the jersey?
I've not seen enough of him, but 33 games he can play left back and centre back. Not seen enough of him to say that he's going to be a Champions League level centre half. You know,
but with regards to Trusty, I think the big question for me, Lawrence, is we're looking at left-sided centre half, and Scales, as you say, he's got the jersey, he's the first choice. So who's Inamura replacing? Is it Trusty? This is a big question, really.
If we clear out, I suppose, Lagerbielke, Rocky and Welsh, you're getting a bit short on your centre half. Cameron Carter-Vickers, we know, isn't always injury-free. Billy played a full season. He misses a lot of games. There's rumours about a bid for him. They could just be looking, well, look, we're going to be a bit light. This boy covers left back and the centre half position. He's maybe brought in as more of a squad player rather than one of your first team starters. We'd be surprised to see us sign him. And if we can get Trusty moved on, then sign a centre half that we think, yet again, is going to replace Liam Scales. Yeah,
again, as you say, the other one, of course, Nat Phillips came in and left the football club as well.
You comparing when you're saying is he a replacement for Scales or Trusty? Are we talking European level or are we talking domestic? Because Trusty's been decent in Europe, I think. And I think sort of Scales has been found a bit more lacking in Europe, whereas Scales is domestically, his form's better, and Trusty's found it harder to sort of navigate the kind of rigours of domestic football. So it's a bit of a quandary, really. For me personally, it would be a replacement for Scales. Not that you asked me, but
I'm going to throw it to you because I can't see us running with three left-sided centre halves for a whole season. And then actually, when you're looking at Carter-Vickers and Murray, I'm only basing that on the fact that Nawrocki's leaving. I'm basing it on the fact that obviously Welsh has been out on loan, so surplus to requirements. Lagerbielke, that's never going to happen for him at Celtic. But then you start asking yourself the question, Ian, is Dane Murray a strong enough backup at right back? He's only played 4 games for Celtic. He has had some really serious injuries himself. We go on about Carter-Vickers, his injury record. Dane Murray's had a lot of injuries. Could you run with just those two? Probably not. So then do you keep one of the guys that we've already mentioned as a backup? I just find it really interesting that we're bringing in Inamura. I don't think we'll keep him, Scales and Trusty at the football club. And I already think that Lagerbielke and Welsh and Nawrocki are leaving. So I think out of the 3, Inamura coming in, it'll be Scales or Trusty. I don't think we can keep all 3 of them. What do you reckon? I mean, it's an interesting take. Atalanta in particular, I thought Trusty was excellent. He was absolutely brilliant that night. So I totally get what you mean there. But domestically, when it's more of a, you're up against Simon Murray, who will play every trick in the book. He didn't like it. I remember a corner kick in that same game where he was as weak as a proverbial, and somebody stood on his foot. Ian, and he completely lost his focus. And he's still moaning at the referee when the corner comes in. And that's the kind of thing you're thinking, no, the dark arts are all part of this game. These guys are playing for their livelihoods. They will do anything to get a point off you. And that's exactly what they got that night. So I totally get it. I totally get it. But why go and buy another left-sided centre-half when we've actually already got 3, but we think one of them will be away. Lagerbielke won't last. He's gone. Which one leaves? Or do we keep all 3 of them?
I think Trusty's got a higher ceiling, and I really, really love Scales. I think he's probably maybe maxed out now in terms of how far he can go. But I think Trusty, he can learn to be more streetwise. He can learn. And I think there's too many mistakes in Scales. I think over the course of time, the fullness of time, we've sort of seen that. It's a kind of a natural sort of levelling off of Scales' potential, I think. Would I keep him in the building? It's maybe unfair on him. I said in the group chat the other day, I don't know how feasible it would be with that Lindelof is a free agent now. Captain of Sweden. I don't know if he's still a captain of Sweden. He's been released by Manchester United. I thought he might be a good shout. He's probably on big wages, but you could sort of sort that out with the signing on fee or whatever. I know that's totally not within the conversation we're having at the moment, but running with 3 of them, I would suggest Scales would be my pick really to sort of let go if it was a choice between him and Trusty.
Well, if you run with 3 of them, obviously one of them, as Liam says, is also a kind of backup left back as well as a backup centre half. So I can understand why they would do that. And by the way, Ian, we've done all right with Swedish centre halves in the past, haven't we? We've had some decent centre halves. Starfelt, Mjällby, big Mastorovic as well. He was he was all right.
Good.
He was a decent enough signing under Lenny as well. So, yes, we're moving on to obviously the last couple of minutes of the show as well. And we've already spoken about the fullback situation with Tierney coming in, the wingers and also the central defender situation. How big is the pre-season, Liam, for guys that haven't had one at Celtic, like Ida, Engels, Austin Trusty?
It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial because we're beyond the bedding in period now. These guys need to start delivering every week. And as I said, you can make allowances for a general dip in the entire team's form from end of January onwards. You can make allowances for the fact that, they were all, Engels in particular, was having to adjust to play a lot more football in a single season than he ever had before. So there's that. But he should be up to that by now. Pre-season, these guys should come out ready. We go to this Champions League qualifier in August. They should be coming out there and showing exactly what they can do.
Yeah, I think it will be really interesting because it's key to a lot of the players that we've mentioned, Lawrence, that they've not had a pre-season with Celtic. I'm going to finish it off by talking about the midfield. Obviously, there has been rumours around some of these guys, Rio and Engels, that apparently there's interest in these players. At the moment, I think we've got 5 first team midfielders in Callum McGregor, Rio Atati, Arnie Engels, Paulo Bernardo and Luke McKeown. We've also got Home and Kuhn out on loan, who I think I would put in the same category as guys like Lagerbielke and Welsh and Palma and Tillio and Yang, because I don't think they contribute. And then you've got the 3 youngsters we were talking about earlier. You've got McArdle, Bonner and Turley. So where are we with the midfield? Do we need reinforcement? Was there something missing in the midfield that you'd like to see added, Lawrence?
I think maybe more natural kind of attacking midfielder, or maybe that's pushing Callum further forward and Engels at 6. I think that was definitely missing. I think maybe we're missing a bit of experience at times. I know we were able to like with Brownhill, and he's a free agent now. You might see him come in, he can play anywhere in midfield. I think at times we weren't as streetwise as we could have been in midfield. We needed someone a bit more physical. Now, obviously, we've got a young midfield. When you look at Engels and Bernardo, both of them need game time. We've got 3 other guys we mentioned trying to get into the midfield. So, depending on who goes, does Hatate stay? I know Brendan played him as more or less the 10 anytime he was fit. If it stays another season, you're not looking to bring in another 10 Champions League level. You're thinking, well, that's Hatate, but I think we could do a better backup for him. If we sell him, it's definitely something we need to address. But maybe the answer's there. You know, I'd love to see Callum playing further forward, and maybe, you know, Bernardo or Engels in at the 6.
We hear it every summer. It was like when Bruni was coming to that, you know, post-30 stage of his career, isn't it? Has he got the legs? Has he got the legs? And we were talking last summer about McGregor maybe playing a more advanced role, and that was the argument. Does he have the legs for it? So we will wait and see. Josh Brownhill has been linked, Lawrence, you're absolutely right, and he's a free agent now, 29 years of age, most recently with Burnley, where he spent 5 years in the midfield as well. I don't know. Is he somebody that you've heard anything about in terms of a link to Celtic, Lawrence?
He said he was scouted. You know, I think it was close at the winter transfer window. Didn't happen. You know, I think we're now paying a Celtic tax. I think Garden. You know, it's thought, you know, obviously we let Kuhn go away and we didn't replace him. But you know, the clubs came out and said they were trying, and I think it was Brondby more or less tried to do what Norwich did this with Ida. You know, we've agreed a price. It's another $1 million. Right, okay, actually, it's another $3 million. And at which point Celtic walked away and went, like, you know, you've agreed kind of 2 prices, and now you want to hit his way with another one that's $3 million more. So I think maybe clubs are sitting up and taking notice of the money we're making of players. And we've always paid that Celtic tax in Scottish football, but I think it's now, it's definitely happening further afield. People are going to sign a player. Their plans, they're going to sell him for a heaps. You know, a couple of years down the line, we want some of that. Plus, they also have got 70 million in the bank. You know, we've got a bit of money lying about. So, I'd like to see Brownhill come in, mate. Play anywhere in midfield, assists, goals, solid physical midfielder. And if maybe that's what Engels and Bernardo would benefit from, you know.
You wouldn't keep all 6 of them, though, Lawrence, would you? The 5 I mentioned, you know, if they are your first team players, you wouldn't
Depends
keep
what
all...
Hattati wants to do, doesn't it? Does he fancy another season? I don't. Listen, when he's good, he's very good, Rio, isn't he?
But I still don't think he's hit his Celtic peak, Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I'd rather Callum play that further advanced midfielder. Rather Rio was more an 8, but he's still got a bit to go. Listen, he came into the game late. Maybe this could be a season where he's consistent all the way through the season. Because when he's good, he's very good. He's a special player, and it's hard to find a guy that can unlock defences.
I'm just going to ask Liam about that, actually. The fact that Japanese players come into the senior game so late, is that one of the reasons, Liam, that they extend it? You see a lot of these Japanese players playing right into their 30s, into their 40s. There was one famous case where he was still playing in his 50s.
Well, Japanese actually, football. he was in the news today. Kazumura played a game today at the age of 58. Yeah.
Oh, my word. I pulled a muscle after 90 seconds 3 weeks ago.
Jim Orr still plays football. Walking football, but still playing.
Slightly different level. Slightly different level.
I don't know, have you seen Jim's goals?
I've heard Jim's a fantastic player. Tony Cassidy told me that. I've not seen you in the chat for a while, Tony, so give us a shout. A couple of more questions and comments before we wrap up for today. David Boyle, always a pleasure to see you. Kuhn, go. For 15 million, I'd sell him, says David. Can't take players on or hit the byline, and the bunker teams found him out in the second half of the season. Joe Houghton, happy birthday to you, Joe. Afternoon to you, happy birthday. 68 today, and yes, I'm a Celtic granda, but I saw the Lisbon Lions play and train and run along Troon Street. Hail, I am blessed to be a Tim. Yes, you are. And we are blessed to have you, Joe, so thanks for joining us. And we've also got Denny, Glebe Street, Celts. We should only sell Kuhn if we get good money for him. What is good money, do you think? 15 million has been floated. Greetings from Tunisia. Absolutely brilliant. Great to hear from you, Pat. And if you are interested in seeing what we do on a live stage, there are fewer than 30 tickets left for Brian McClare and Peter Grant. I think I've been filtering out some of the Brian McClare clips recently, and people have started thinking, oh, that could be a laugh. It will be. It will be tremendous. Lawrence, you've seen him in action. There's nobody quite like Chalky, is there?
No, it's very good sense of humour, mate. It's very entertaining, even with Chalky. More dangerous than Lineker, I believe somebody said.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Was that, let me think now, it was, who was it that said that? I seen that interview just the other day. Terry Butcher? Was it Terry Butcher, I think?
Maybe Terry Butcher, yeah. More dangerous than Lineker and better than Johnston. Don't know which ones he was talking about.
Oh, Le Petit. The little one. That was Terry Butcher that said that the other day. I saw that interview. If you want to come along and sample what Acsom does, then no better venue to do it in than Gracie's. It's a great intimate venue. almost sold out. Peter Grant is, let's not forget, Granty will also be on the stage. And as well as being a really funny and intelligent guy, Brian McClare talks brilliantly about Scottish football and how to fix it as well. So we'll be talking about all these different things. Just don't ask him what his favourite Rebel tune is, because he will tell you. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to Liam, Ian, and Lauren. Ask him about what?
Oh, we'll be bin men this time. But the train strike will probably be the bin men strike this time.
Yeah, hey, absolutely. Aye, because he was doing it at Aston Villa. That's where he started his career. He was on the books of 3 different European Cup winning teams. I don't know how many Scottish players can say that. Aston Villa, Celtic and Manchester United. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.